Today we are honored to welcome Cathy Williams to the show today. She's the founder of Intuitive Self, and she talks many things about healing, especially somatic work. And on the show, we talk about becoming the greatest version of yourself every single day. And it's hard to do if you don't feel well. And I always say that your inner world creates your outer world, right? So really developing that healing within ourselves and starting to develop this relationship with ourselves is so key. And we can learn practices that we can take on for a lifetime to keep us whole and healthy. And we have one of the best experts in the world right here to talk about this. And I'm very excited to have her on. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks, Anthony, for having me.
Absolutely. So I am very interested to hear your story and how you got into healing and wellness in the first place.
Mm, it's been quite a journey, um, but I'm happy to report that everything that I went through, I can understand why now. And it has given me the biggest drive in my service for others. And it's given me all of these pillars of tools that I'm now able to offer and hone for my own practice and for others. So I have a long history of working in community development. I actually started off my career wanting to be a journalist, and that took me to wanting to actually work on the ground with the social justice issues that I was passionate about. And it was through this work that I had many experiences working in community, working in developing communities, and learning people's stories and being involved in capacity building programs. So, this through line of working with people, working with their challenges, and learning about the ways that we deeply want connection and this feeling of belonging was something that those founding years offered me. And it was through this work that I was living in communities overseas and was actually unaware of it myself, but I was throwing myself into my work so much that I was getting very disconnected from my own body. I was disconnecting from my own feelings. And in the work that I've done since then, I realize with hindsight that, I had so many of my own uncomfortable feelings that I wasn't okay with sitting with myself, that I wanted to distract myself by throwing myself into work. But what that meant was that I ended up getting incredibly burnt out and depleted in this field. And after about 5 or 6 years of working overseas, I came back to my hometown in Melbourne, and I was at a loss. I felt very down. I recognized that I'd been living quite dominantly in my mind and disconnecting from my body and from my feelings. And it was at this point that I was invited to what ended up being like a women's group circle. But in this gathering, the facilitator had just done her movement therapy training at the Tamalpa Institute in California. And the invitation was for us to feel everything that we were currently feeling in that season of life and give expression to it. So here I was, this, burnt out community development worker, and I was given permission that I didn't even realize I was wanting for the first time, where I was like, oh, how am I actually feeling? And all of the experiences that I'd been going through and possibly, really ignoring and distracting myself from, they all started to boil to the surface. And I was given this space with a group of other non-judgmental, compassionate women to move my body, to feel my feelings, to give expression to the story inside myself through the music, through the rhythm, and eventually then onto the page with different colored pastels and drawing materials. And it completely changed me. I went up to the facilitator and I was like, what is this? Like, I'd done dance classes when I was younger, but nothing to the extent of this therapeutic capacity. So that is what started my journey of uncovering movement and art therapy. And I threw myself into many different courses, into different mentorships, and it really offered this avenue where, because I'd come back so depleted and not sure how I could continue in my career that I'd chosen, I was actually able to see, no, I still want to work with people, but this is the modality that I can see is working for me, and that's what I want to learn and be able to offer back to others. So I went on and did that, and then in 2016, that's when I started Intuitive Self.
Wow, that's incredible. So it sounds like you kind of went along your path. You had almost this burnout, right? And this like a lot of emotions were kind of piling up, but you didn't really know how to deal with the proper thing with it, right? So you went to this facility, and you had people hold a space for you in a sense to be able to kind of move things out and be able to process. Do I have that right?
Yes, yeah. It was a beautiful, very spontaneous gathering, but it was the space holding, it was the permission, it was this modality where we didn't have to necessarily find the words to what we're experiencing, because sometimes it's really hard to do that. And I know that I'd done many different forms of talk therapy before where I'd gotten caught in the story. And in this particular season of my life, I didn't have words for it. I just had my body that had been holding it all. So I was really given permission to express it and to process it. And I think that's the biggest drive for why I believe in this work so much. It's, when we give our feelings the space and the platform to not numb ourselves to or distract ourselves against, when we're actually, courageously sitting with the feeling, we're able to be curious about it and to actually go lean in a little bit more, where we could be like, okay, why am I feeling like this? What's actually happening? What does this part of me want to say and express in this moment? And being able to identify how we store that in the body and what our body signals are actually saying to us at any given time is key, I think, for us being able to be connected deeper to ourselves and work in partnership with the body.
Absolutely. And that's the power of community as well. Like people who are really interested in your healing. And especially if we're first getting started, that can be such a powerful experience because we may not have the belief yet, but we have people who believe in us, and that may be enough in the situation.
I love that. That's so powerful. And I think there's only so much that we can do on our own. I think even just the power of being witnessed by someone else in our raw, vulnerable selves is, like when people really see us, like we feel a sense of companionship. Obviously, it's up to us to do the inner work ourselves, but to not feel alone in our experiences is powerful.
Absolutely. That's the key because a lot of people, we feel like we're alone. Like we have these things happen to us, but we don't necessarily seek healing, or we're kind of in this frozen state where we really don't know what to do. So it kind of almost had this feeling of disconnection in a sense.
Yeah, and that frozen state, I think I've definitely experienced that over the years, in those early years where I wasn't really able to identify what was happening for me. My go-to one was to dissociate, so to actually just keep myself so busy that I didn't feel what I was feeling. So I've kind of done a full 180 on that now, and I'm like, okay, I can really sense what's happening in my body now, and that's what I like to support others to do as well.
Awesome. So you talk a lot about somatic therapy. Can you define what that is and different modalities and how we can get started with that?
Yeah, so somatic movement therapy is a body oriented therapy. So it really places the body as key in not only the assessment of what's happening with someone, but the treatment as well. So when we are thinking about the framework of somatic movement therapy, we're really looking at through rather the somatic lens. So taking in what's happening to our bodies, what we're feeling through our bodies at any one time. So, for example, when someone comes to see me, whether that's one on one or in like a public workshop, what I am encouraging and inviting people to do is really tune in with their body. So, to become more body aware. So, instead of being just in the mind, just in their thoughts, also acknowledging what's happening in their bodies. So, what's happening, what sensations are they aware of? What emotions can they feel rising to the surface? Because it's all connected. So, in summary, somatic movement therapy is really seeing the body as a whole. And it's the belief that our bodies have carried us through all of our different experiences and can often hold that in our systems and in our muscle tension, for example, if we aren't aware of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have like all these experiences in our life, but I feel like a lot of us we have the static on the line where we have this disconnection for many things because there's so many distractions in the world, things that happen, and being able to reconnect to that is really where the power is. That's what I find.
Yeah. One of the the biggest, I guess, successes of this work, to use that kind of language, is what I realized for my own journey was when I disconnected from my body, I was disconnecting from my intuition. So that connection to self, that inner resource that was able to support and help me navigate life decisions and be able to be a bit of a compass for what was right for me and what was not right for me, what was actually serving me and not. And when I recognized and started to acknowledge that, oh, when I disconnected from my body and all the times I'd been numbing or distracting myself from what I was actually feeling, I was actually unknowingly disconnecting from my intuition. And our intuition, we all have access to this inner wisdom, to this internal resource that when it's like a muscle, when we're able to practice it and acknowledge that it's there and learn to trust in it, that is our biggest navigation system.
Absolutely. I mean, I talk about inner guidance a lot. Can you define what that is? How we can start to take the first steps to reconnecting to that? Like, what is the process of that? And start to develop our intuition and everything that goes into that.
So I see my intuition as that inner guidance. So it's that invitation to pause and to actually feel and acknowledge what's happening for me in this moment and how do I feel about it? Like, how do I really feel about it when I take off any mask that I'm wearing, that society has put on us, when I stop being the good girl, people pleaser, for example, when I'm put in a situation where I have to make a decision or, just, yeah, basically decide something for myself and for my life. How do I really feel about it? And for me, my intuition really speaks to me through the body. So I have definitely had multiple experiences in life where I felt like something was a bit off. Like people talk about like their gut feeling, like they just felt it in their gut. It doesn't necessarily have to make sense to anyone else, but something was off. And when we pay attention to that, I think it's really powerful because when we ignore that, that's when the mind can come in, or that's when society's pressures can come in, for example, of, oh no, I think you're being silly, like don't worry about that, or oh no, like, you said you were going to do this, so you need to follow through. Whatever it is, there are there's this communication that's happening through the body, which I've learnt through different body awareness practices to actually take that pause and be like, hey, what's happening in the body? How do I feel about this? And it is a practice. We talk about this work really being a practice because it's not something where, there's like a direct handbook of how to read your own body. It's something where it's your own tuning into and taking the time and the patience and having curious inquiry. When you asked about where people can start, I think the starting point can often be, do you have a relationship with your intuition? What does that even mean to you? Because when we start to acknowledge that there is such thing as intuition and how that might uniquely show up and communicate with you, I think that that's a really powerful entry point. Even if people don't necessarily believe it, being curious about what that could mean for them in their life and starting to playfully and creatively inquire with their body, take that pause, do some body awareness where, in a moment where they have to make a decision, and it could be a really light decision. Do I go to that event? Do I stay in? Then, feeling, okay, how do I feel in my body when I feel into what it would be like to go out to that event? Do I feel like a feeling of expansion, for example, or am I feeling contracted? Do I feel like a bit, is there a sensation in my body that makes me feel light or heavy? And I think that when we start to allow those feelings and sensations to come to light, then we're able to make meaning of them. So for me, I've come to recognize that when I feel that lighter feeling and I feel like my shoulders drop and my chest expand a little bit more, I'm like, oh, that's what's right for me. And if there's a feeling where I'm feeling a bit contracted, or even my mind comes in really quickly because of old patterning and it's like, oh no, you should do this, you should, the shoulds, then I start to recognize, oh, but where's that actually coming from? What's driving that? So yeah, I think it's definitely a practice, but it's one that, you're in your body for your whole life. It's a really important relationship to cultivate and you can have fun with it. And that's what I like to encourage. And, the movement, art therapy can be really playful and, I call it creatively self-discovering because that's what it feels like. It's this journey of continually discovering and working with the body rather than against it.
Yeah, I love how you said that. It's a practice, right? It's this thing that we continually do and we can actually get better at it. I mean, I think it's good to filter things through your values as well, right? Because we have so many decisions we make throughout the day and really knowing what we want and who we are, it just helps things move more efficiently and more quicker in my experience too.
I love that. Yeah, I think values work is so important and I always like to see how things align with that in terms of making decisions as well.
Yeah, definitely. You talked about somatic dance as well. It's something I'm not really familiar with. I'm really excited to hear more about that.
So I yeah, sometimes I try and avoid the word dance just because it has, people have particular stories when, that's connected to different language and different terms. And, I did a lot of work with young women. And when I realized that when I first started working with them, when I used the term dance, people's body language changed, with the use of that word because they were like, oh, does that mean I have to dance in a certain way or look a certain way? So, the term that I like to use more often now is intuitive movement. So, what this offers
Mm.
is, when we are taking this time to be in our body, recognize that we are in a body, and I use music to create particular atmospheres and to create different rhythms that we can play with. And the invitation is to really let the body lead and to see what story is inside of them that wants to be shared through the movement. So instead of it being choreographed or following a particular sequence, it's really about intuitively moving how the body might want to move. Now, this can be really intimidating for people. And what I like to do is, we don't throw ourselves straight into it. We really warm up with, often with a body scan and really arriving in the space and then feeling into those different sensations that are alive in the body. Maybe I'll invite them to bring in some somatic touch. So that is touch on themselves that they're doing for themselves. And that, that could be using their hands to rub their hands to warm them up, and then bringing in some tapping or some patting around the body, bringing in some self massage or some caressing or brushing motions. And this really, what I love about that is that it's all self-paced. It is directed by the individual, and they can start to tune into, oh, how does their body want to be touched in that moment? How does their body want to be held? And what is the feedback that they're getting from different styles of touch, because some touch can be heightening, some touch can be comforting. And what we're doing is we're really, with different styles of touch, we're going around and we're saying hello to different parts of the body that we might not necessarily give much attention to during our day to day. And with the touch where, we're offering different stimulation to it, and then this is then allowing new sensations to come. And often I invite them to pay attention to those sensations and then see how their body wants to respond to that. So is that stretching themselves out? Is that, moving different body parts, feeling the rhythm of the music? And usually through my intuitive movement explorations, I'm peppering in different prompts that they can take or they can leave depending on what they're inspired by. And it's really beautiful because people who, would originally call themselves, oh, I'm not a dancer or I don't know how to move. It's not about looking a certain way. It's really about allowing the feelings to come and to develop that dialogue with the body where they're allowing the body to lead in that moment and being able to play with it through the movement.
Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. Like somatic movement, that makes more sense as well because it can incorporate other practices like walking or qigong, right? Just being able to
Yes.
feel again, because a lot of us were sedentary a lot, so that kind of it's kind of a block in a sense, right? So just being able to listen to your body and develop that relationship through movement, that's really key.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it doesn't, movement doesn't have to look, be these grand gestures, often in the workshops that I run, whether it's online or in person, everyone's doing their own thing. And, you can have someone who is concentrating on the really subtle movement of their breath and, the rise and fall of their chest, for example. And then you can have someone repeating a movement of swinging their arms around because that's what feels good for them and that's what feels pleasurable. And, we've got our everyday movement and going back to the somatic lens and the somatic framework, it's really this knowing that when we change movement, we're changing the psyche, and that is the intention that we're actually able to feel our feelings and move emotional states and transmute emotional states through the moving of the body.
100%. So, in terms of somatic therapy, you mentioned that it's really important to develop a relationship with your body because we live within their whole life. So that makes a lot of sense, right? So you may as well like have this healthy relationship with yourself because it's going to, in many parts, dictate our actions in a sense, right? And living our best life is going to require all parts of us get on board. Like that's what part of integrity as well, I believe.
Yes, absolutely agree. It's I think it's the, you know, I think we there's a lot of talk around, developing our minds, which obviously is important, but I think that the body and the heart gets ignored. And so what this really advocates for is working all three of them in partnership together.
100%. I don't know if you've ever heard anything kind of mentioned like this, but I like to talk about being skilled in the art of mobility. So when it
Mm,
comes to fitness, there's different pillars like strength, endurance, and mobility. I'm not talking about flexibility, but mobility is a little bit different. So I don't really hear this talked about a lot. It's essentially using things like foam rollers, golf balls, things like that to really work on the deep tissue work. It's
mm,
because the fascia, which is interconnected throughout the entire body, has been actually studied for being connected with the emotions and feelings and things like that. So in addition to like being really good for like fitness and being mobile and all that, I feel like it's also simultaneously great for emotional release and just being good on your energetic hygiene.
yes, I love that. I think it's fascinating when we start doing this work, realizing what our body holds. Yeah, and I agree with you with the emotional release that comes from this work.
Yeah.
You
Because
said
like we have
that,
these muscle adhesions, like this tightness.
yes.
What's that?
I was just going to ask, you
Yeah,
said
and we
that,
don't really understand.
sorry, you go.
Hey, go ahead.
I was curious about somatic movement in your healing journey.
Yeah, for sure. So that's something that's ongoing as well, like because it's the healing, like it's something that we kind of continue out throughout our life, right? Because we're gonna have things happen. But in terms of my own healing, in terms of Lyme disease, it was really important to kind of get connected through movement in a sense, because I always like to say the number one thing that healed me was actually developing the relationship with myself, like really
Mm,
kind of developing the mind and really like holistic healing in a sense.
yes.
And nowadays, I do a lot of walking, I do a lot of qigong, and of course, I go to the gym and things like that. But I think it's really important because it also helps you think through things, like develop certain thought processes, think through anything that may have happened throughout the day, and it really works everything, the mind, body, and spirit. So I
Mm,
think it's really important.
that's beautiful. That's so beautiful.
Thank you. I was mentioning the muscle adhesions because like we walk around with this tightness. It's everywhere, like, and we don't really notice it until we kind of work on it in a sense. It's a totally different way of being. If you start like like mobility and getting rid of it, you feel so much better, and you don't really know unless you know.
Yes. Yeah, you've got to try it to understand.
Definitely. So also talk about like reflective practices, like contemplation and things like that. Like, what is the role of contemplation that we can use for self discovery, and how do we get started in that?
Mm. Yes, I am really big on self-reflective practices, and I the work that I do weaves in these body-based practices, but also creative reflective practices with art therapy, and it's been a game changer in my life. I think that it's been a way for me to make sense of my experiences, but also to process what's actually happening and get to the root of some of this. So what I really love to do and what I love to encourage my clients to do is, keep obviously keep a journal, but that journal doesn't have to be just words. So I really encourage people to do an art journal. So it's really, again, listening to the body and what they feel to do on that day or that week. But sometimes, doodling even, or bringing out different pastels or textures and different colors, lines, and shapes can be a form of release and a form of expression. And then afterwards, we come back and look at our pieces. And again, it's not looking at it like, okay, what's this masterpiece I've created? It's not about the finished product, but in taking the time to take in the image that's come through, I feel like there's messages in there, there's insights in there. I often ask people to reflect on, okay, what are their eyes drawn to? Is there any particular symbols that are coming through in that piece? How do they feel in their body when they look upon that drawing, for example? I just yesterday actually, I had all of these old magazines, and on the side of the road, someone had thrown out this frame. And so it inspired me to just sit down with the magazines and cut out different images and different words that were speaking to me and put them together in a bit of a collage. And it's kind of like a functional meditation practice, if you will. So I wasn't really thinking about anything. I wasn't feeling very emotional about anything at the time. But it was just this really beautiful way to sit and be and use my hands. And then at the end, I put it all together and, glued it all down. And I can make meaning of that for myself through the different images that I was drawn to, through the different colors that were attractive to me in that moment. And there is a certain beauty that comes from interpreting your own work like that. So it's not up for anyone else to interpret or to make meaning. It's really this offering for me to sit and reflect on what that might be sharing, what insights might be there for me to listen to from my own psyche, from my own inner wisdom that might be speaking to me in this particular day or season of my life.
Very interesting. Yeah, I've done a lot of contemplation myself, but I haven't learned a whole lot about like the arts and the drawing and all that. So I think that's really interesting.
I think, one of the things that I always do in any of my offerings with people is, there's generally a bit of a journey. So say that we're working together for the hour and a half, it'll be, we might start off with a body scan and some body awareness practices to really tune into what's happening in the body in this moment, that somatic check-in, to feel the sensations. And then there's that opening where we might feel something or identify something in our body, and that's our entry point. So that's when we're able to do an intuitive movement exploration with that part of ourselves and really invite that part of ourselves to take the stage, so to speak, so to really express and to see what's there. But I'll always integrate with writing on the writing and drawing on the page. So there'll often be, there's a bit of a integration with the movement, and then instead of talking about it straight away, I'll invite them to continue that exploration onto the page. So choosing different colors and textures that they're drawn to and just seeing how their hands want to explore on the page. And I think this is a really beautiful, non-intimidating way to start that creative expression, because they're already moving, they've already got that dialogue with the body, they're already open in that self-expression. And then putting putting color onto the page with different lines and shapes, then, it's often capturing a feeling or capturing what they've explored. And then after about, 10 or 15 minutes from doing that, then I might have some writing prompts. And those writing prompts are either from their body or from the drawing themselves. So it could be, I am, or I long to, or within my body tells me. And they're just little prompts of inspiration to see what, wants to come through the subconscious mind. And then people are always so fascinated with what does come through and what wisdom is there to be shared and what, might be below the surface, that they hadn't necessarily thought of or felt before. So that's a really beautiful, I guess, entry point to starting that creative reflective practice, and something that I encourage people to do outside of our sessions as well. So starting that art journal process. And again, it's not for anyone else to see. It's a really private process, but it's really beautiful to have sort of like a regular habit where there is that opportunity for creative expression.
Absolutely. I feel like there's so many different tools out there, but ultimately experimenting and trying things that work for us, right? And also, when we do this, we can kind of adopt a variety of tools. And as we were talking about, in a sense, we kind of get intuitive and see what we need in the moment, right? Because what we need right now may be different in the future, and just kind of adapting it to whatever we're going through. I think that's really powerful too.
Yes, and that's the thing. It's like, our feelings change from every moment to moment, but when we're able to tune in and start to be curious about and listen to what the body is saying and what the body needs, then we can adapt. We've got that dialogue with self that we're able to adapt and respond to care for ourselves in each moment.
Yeah, you talked a lot about how like a lot of these practices bring things to the surface in a sense, right? Because when you're holding on to things, and sometimes we don't understand what we're holding on to, and until we actually start to begin this work, and I feel like awareness is the first step to change, right? So really cultivating that awareness within us, so then we can do the creative healing work, and sometimes it can be overwhelming in a sense. So just being able to uh, focus on progress, not perfection, right? It's not about doing it all at once. It's about doing what we can in the moment.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there is so much that when our awareness starts to open up and we're able to even just start to get curious about what might be happening, it doesn't mean that we have to do anything about it. Let's just, I really like to encourage people, even if they've got busy days, busy lives, they don't feel like they've got any time for themselves. What would it mean to take a pause during their workday? What would it mean to just get up and have a stretch, stretch their body? What would it mean to do like a mini somatic check-in where they're just closing their eyes down so they can focus on the inner world and just scan through the body, crown to feet, and just see, okay, what's happening in the body, and how does my body want to move, even for a couple of minutes, for the time that it takes to listen to one song, and start to see the difference that even just these little peppered moments can offer.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned that, those mini check-ins, because we have a lot of things to do throughout the day. We may not have this like long period of meditation that we have so just being able to like have these practices available to us and see when we need that moment. I think that's really important because even like these micro check-ins and kind of being able to get connected in that way, it can help us stay focused for the next thing as well.
Yes, absolutely. And it's a opportunity to refocus and to be really intentional with our attention as well.
Yeah, you mentioned the power of curiosity, like being able to ask empowering questions about the situation, right? Just not like judging it in a sense, but just being curious to what this could be, right? It's so powerful because if we judge something, it's very difficult to heal it in a sense.
Yes, like I think curiosity is one of my biggest values, and I think it naturally means that we lean in a little bit more, and we're being curious about it. We're not judging how we're feeling, we're not judging what it might mean. We're just kind of allowing it to be. And there's beauty and power in that. And I think the it's a really beautiful entry point as well, like I think, I have many experiences of this, and I talk about that in my book as well. But this self-talk that we have cultivated over the years, we might not necessarily talk to a friend the way that we talk to ourselves. It could be quite negative. And I yeah, when I started to recognize that I was doing that to myself, I was like, oh my goodness, like it's quite awful. So instead of judging it, or what we also can often do is bypass the emotion and go straight to wanting to fix it. Instead of doing either of those things, we're actually like, okay, let's just be curious. What's there? What wants to be known? What wants to come up? And just letting it be, like not even needing to fix it, but just acknowledging, okay, I'm feeling sad today. That's all right. Thank you, sadness, for showing up. Like it's a really compassionate way that we can be with ourselves, and compassion is powerful.
Right. That self talk is so important. I find what helps me is just kind of like power of presence, just being in the moment, being silent.
Mm.
And I mean, it may be difficult if you're first starting out because the noise may be so loud, but if you can just develop that powerful presence and just have total silence, I feel like a lot of those negative thoughts and things like that just kind of dissipate because you can be the moment. I think that's important too.
I love that. The power of presence.
Something I've been saying is like it's not that life that we're experiencing life. It goes both ways. Life is also experiencing us in a sense. Like we're trying to like we're in an experience, right? But it's also goes the other way, like because your energy is also going to influence everything around you.
Mm. Yeah, that's fascinating. Life is experiencing us. That's cool.
So, you had mentioned writing a lot before, right?
Mm.
And are there any journal prompts or things that you'd recommend in order to kind of start that process in a sense? Because there's a lot of modalities, but I feel like journaling is something I've talked about a lot, but many people are interested, but they don't really know where to start.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. I think that there is a lot of curiosity and interest out there, but then, yeah, people sort of come to a loss when they don't know where to start. And it's sort of like seeing a blank canvas and then being like, oh, that's so intimidating. Like, I don't know how I even want to attack that piece. So in in my book, actually, I've got some prompts that I could share. In my book, Body Wisdom, I speak about, starting a dialogue with the self, and what that can look like and mean when it comes to creative reflection and writing prompts. So in chapter 2, the chapter's called Heart, Body and Mind, and it offers different prompts to start to, I guess, start that dialogue with the body. And, that could be a body part, or it could be the body in general. Like, okay, hi body, this is a bit weird, but, I want to get to know you more. And so some of the ones that I offer on page 43 are: I am wanting, I am seeking, I am embracing, I am feeling, I am needing, I am no longer, I am giving myself permission to, I am most in need of, I am sharing, I am desiring, I am allowing, I am not acknowledging, I am willing to. So it's really starting with the I am, which is this perfect entry point for the present moment. So where you are in the season of life right now, I am ... And I think, we could be our own worst enemy in a way, that we think that it has to look a certain way or be a certain way, or it has to be profound. But, your journaling process is so unique to you, and it's so private, and you also don't have to read back over it. Like, I don't know many people who read back over what they wrote. And I have different books for different things. And there's one journal where, if I feel like if I'm really in my mind or really in a particular emotion, I'll shake my body out, I'll brush myself off, I might move around intuitively. But if my mind is racing, one of the best practices that I found for myself is to write it out, because I know that those thoughts don't necessarily mean that they're my identity, but it's a particular state that I need to move through my body. So even the motion of like moving my hand against the page with the pen and just getting it all out, how I'm feeling, what's going on, what stories am I creating for myself. That process is very cathartic. And, I think it's one of those things that when you start, and when you really give yourself permission to just, not judge the words that are coming up, then there's beautiful answers there. There's a lot of release, but by the end of it, sometimes I'll just leave it as is. Sometimes I'll realize that what I'm writing is the answer that I'm seeking. That I wouldn't have found in another way, or it would have taken me a lot longer to get there.
I like that. Questions are the answer, right? We are asking questions in a sense, and it's just an important skill, like developing the power of asking empowering questions, because the better questions that we ask, the better answers we're going to get, and just kind of being detailed in that matter as well.
Yes.
So I believe you were talking about presence as well, and I think it's important to understand for people that all we have is right now, essentially. Like, the past doesn't exist, the future doesn't either. And when they did, and it always happens right now. Like, all we have is the present moment experience. So it's kind of owning that moment. And through these practices that you're talking about, just kind of like developing more powerful presence in a sense. And that's where it all begins. Like, because the more present that we are, the more the more deeper we can feel as well.
Yeah, and it's, there's so much out there that is trying to distract us from our feelings. But for me, and for everyone that I've ever worked with, that space that opens up when we get curious about how we're feeling and allow our feelings to be expressed, there's so much power in that. There's so much healing in actually feeling what's happening and feeling what's going on for us. You know, our feelings are there to be felt, not to be silenced.
Definitely. When it comes to trauma, like there's different types of traumas, obviously. Like, would you kind of classify that? Because maybe micro traumas or big traumas.
I think it's really difficult to define and classify. I think, you know, what we might say someone's experience is, you know, oh, that's, you know, it's all relative. It really is the impact that whatever experience that person has gone through has had on them and continues to have on them. So I guess they, you know, they have agency over the weight and impact that that has had on them and how they define it. I think it can often be quite dismissive for someone else to tell us that, oh, you know, that's just a minor trauma. You know, like I think I've had that experience before where, you know, they were probably meaning well and they were trying to maybe downplay it. But what that did was it made me shut down even more. It made me, you know, feel very dismissed and feel as if I shouldn't make a big deal out of it because that's just a minor trauma, for example. So I kind of avoid classifying things and not using that language with people because I think it's it's really up to them. I mean, yeah, I guess not everyone would agree with me, but I think that there can be some negative impact to defining someone else's trauma.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, because it's going to be personalized to us. Because no one's going to experience it like we experience it. Like we may look at someone else and be like, "Oh, that's I wouldn't see how that'd be trauma," but it's going to be dependent on the person and their state of mind and where they are in life.
Yes, yeah, there's so many different factors to it, and you know, and what's that person's capacity? What's their support system like? What access to resources do they have? There's so many different factors. But yes, trauma is a big one, you know, and our body stores can often store our trauma as well.
Yeah, those are a lot of great points there. All right, Kathy, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with us. I really enjoyed it. You talked a lot about somatic therapy and different modalities within that, and I really recommend people just to get started because if we find what works for us in a sense, and we can start to develop that relationship with yourself, you can start to become a light for other people as well and be the model of what is possible. That is the goal, right? So we can take on these practices and live our best life at the end of the day, and that's what it's all about. I appreciate you so much, Kathy.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the conversation.
Yeah, so I know people are going to want to get connected with you and your work. So where can we go for that?
So my business is called Intuitive Self. So the website is intuitiveself.com.au. There's a bunch of free resources on there for people to try out for that entry point to get started. I also have my book Body Wisdom, which has 20 practices on how to get more comfortable in the body. It offers invitations for these creative reflective practices we've been talking about through the body, through journaling, through creative arts. And there's also a journal companion on the shop as well. And on Instagram, I'm intuitive self double underscore. And yeah, I really welcome people connecting. I offer free discovery sessions for an hour for people to come and we meet heart to heart and see where they're at in life and what resources could support them in their journey.
All right. Awesome. I appreciate you so much, Kathy.
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks for having me.